There I was under the table with my brother and the family dog, Candy, feeling loved. The day was Saturday, Sabbath in my mom's tradition, when she and the aunts and Grammy would gather at the table and pour coffee and break bread, Edamund's cheese Danishes, raspberry Danish, and sharing their weekly joys and concerns and how Jesus was in those stories, how they could help a family in need, children that need clothes or diapers. As with every Saturday morning gathering in our rural New Hampshire home, they would hold hands and begin with prayer. An adult hand or two would reach under the table for us, searching for us, widening the circle, the praying circle, to make sure we were among them. It wasn't that we couldn't sit at the table with the adults. We just prefer to be under the table with the dog, listening and playing and lying on Candy and just being part of that family energy, satisfied with whatever crumbs of love would fall from the table. We'd pop our heads up every once in a while for a real morsel, help stir a coffee or two, tug on mom's arm or snuggle up with Grammy. Yes, we'd whine or tattle, seeking acknowledgement, demanding to be seen. And we'd be sent away to go play every once in a while if we became too pesty, or when the conversation became too sensitive for our little ears. Or we would leave on our own, Candy in tow, filled up with the crumbs, satisfied, knowing we were a part of this sacred circle, God's circle. Church was something different for me growing up. We didn't belong to the traditional church until later, when Dan and I started having a family and found our home with a congregational church. But growing up, my family was shooed away, excluded, ostracized by the institutional church over and over again. We didn't fit in. My grandmother, a devout Christian, deeply spiritual woman, and a chartered member of the local Seventh-day Adventist church, was kicked out, excommunicated, not once, but twice, for not following the rules and the practices of the time. Their morality church mission was hard to follow. One of the reasons she was kicked out happened on a Saturday after church. My grandmother was seen escorting my grandfather, who chose to be at the local tavern, Bible in one hand, grandfather in the other. What demonic behavior, their church would say. The second time was for leaving my grandfather, or at least trying to. A heathen possessed by the devil, they shouted in the 1940s. My mother, a deeply spiritual woman, also married an Irish Catholic who now was also damned by the church, especially when she returned to the hills of New Hampshire from the flatlands of Massachusetts, divorced with 4 little ones to feed. The neighborhood Catholic church also sent her away. Her divorced woman status, single mother of 4, presence was too loud for the church and too loud for this neighborhood in the 1970s. She was one of the first divorced women in this small rural town. They even had petitions against her for trying to buy a home. Oh, you could hear the shuddering, can't you? The disgrace, the sadness. They couldn't have that kind of person in their churches or around. According to them, her worthiness in the eyes of God was in question. And her children's Massachusetts accents didn't help either. We were seen as foreigners, the unclean, often referred to as those flatlanders. Now, a charity crumb or two would be tossed our way from the table. Hungry, we'd eat it and find our way back in the pew or in the church basement for some kind of event, only to be disappointed again. My brothers and I did attend the CCD classes at St. Peter's during the school year and loved the vacation Bible school with the Seventh-day Adventist Church in the summer. We tried to learn their ways, to follow the rules. We never really felt like we belonged, nor did we understand their definition of the Christian mission. They said one thing and did another. A loving hand did not reach under the table for ours. We were prevented from popping up and helping to stir coffee or speak with conviction. The morsels that were offered to us were often laced with pity or judgment. We did not fit the mold of who they thought was worthy of God's grace. Their missional church circle did not include us. We made them feel uncomfortable. Our presence created tension. We stretched them. Today's gospel reading is an uncomfortable, tense dialogue between the disciples, Jesus, and a Canaanite woman that stretches us today. It's an uneasy place in the movement's mission. Who's in and who's out? And equity, justice, prejudice, compassion, conviction, and faith all wrapped up in this one pericope, told orally for 30 to 40 years before it was even recorded in the Gospel of Matthew and Mark. Jesus and his disciples went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon, a Gentile pagan territory, an area known for hostility. Bad blood runs deep in this area between the Jews and the Gentiles. And we have a tenacious Canaanite woman, an unclean woman, a non-Jew appearing on the scene, shouting for mercy, recognizing Jesus for his authority as the Son of David, using psalmist language, urging him to help her daughter who is tormented by the devil. She is kneeling and praying for help, stating she is satisfied with the crumbs that would fall off the master's table, demanding she is worthy of God's love. Send her away. She keeps shouting after us, the disciples said. Jesus, send her away. And Jesus said nothing. How strange. His silence surely makes us pause today. That's not the Jesus we know. And causing more tension and uneasiness for us is when we hear Jesus reply to the woman, I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. As if to say to her, helping you is not my understanding of the mission. You're not a lost sheep. You're not one of God's chosen people. We need to take care of our own first. You're not as worthy? Wait, what's going on here? Why is Jesus acting like this? What's happening? Why is this woman like this in this gospel story? The uneasiness continues for us. Did Jesus really just call her a dog? Using this ancient derogatory slang word Jews used for the Gentiles of the time, highlighting the us and them dichotomy of the mission? She's not deterred. Her presence is bold and loud and relentless. Unlike other portrayals of women of the time, she has agency and power and represents the voices from the margin, demanding to be seen, embodying an unexpected level of faith, a level of faith that some of Jesus' disciples have not even exhibited yet. Then there's a shift. Woman, Jesus now calls her, using a biblical term of endearment, marking a family relation. Your faith is great. And he heals her daughter. Boom, done. Just like that. It is here, through the tension and uncomfortableness, we witness God breaking through, broadening the understanding of the Holy One's mission. Or as Letty Russell put it in her book, Church in the Round, here in this moment, Jesus is broadening his ministry of hospitality to those outside of the house of Israel, opening the circle of God's household to others. to foreigners, to those who did not identify as Jewish, to the disenfranchised, to the unclean. Scholarship differs whether Jesus knew what was going to happen or not. He was the one to bring them to this unclean territory in the first place. Regardless, God is teaching us something powerful here. Gospel writers must have included this painful, harsh story for a reason today. Following Jesus has the power to stop us in our tracks indeed, stretch our cultural understandings, liberate, empower, elevate voices from the margins, and challenge our preconceived notions of faith, family, and mission. This gospel reading shows us that entering uncomfortable dialogues, places of tension, challenging spaces, that's when we hear God breaking through with the kingdom of heaven, as if to say, lean in and pay attention. I have something to say. Churches have changed over the years, evolved with the times. The Seventh-day Adventists and the Catholic Church traditions and many other denominations, including Congregationalists, have let go of their harsh practices and barriers of the past. But we still see evidence of harmful practices, hate and violence and prejudices, exclusion across the modern day spectrum of Christianity. We just need to turn on the news. The church mission was and still can be too focused on its own needs, own definition of salvation, cleanliness, who's worthy of God's grace, who's in and who's out. Churches have a hard time looking beyond themselves, looking in the mirror to see that it's about God's needs and mission in the world and not theirs. Today, our definition of church mission is being challenged. Our patterns of existence, our understanding of church, the power structure, systems, our Christian identity are constantly under fire. And many of us want to turn from those uncomfortable places and the tension and cling to what we know. Turn down the dial of the Canaanite woman of today. The noises from the margins are overwhelming and can be deafening, whether it's shouts about global warming, racial justice, addiction, mental health, the LGBTQ community, school shootings, suicides, homelessness, and the hungry. You name it. These voices from the margins are calling us to those uncomfortable spaces and places, demanding to be recognized, acknowledged, and valued. And if we're honest, we sometimes respond like the early disciples. Jesus, send them away. They keep shouting at us to do something. We're not sure what to do, what that something is. What does this have to do with our church mission today? And much like the disciples, we turn to Jesus and watch and wait to see what he does next. Yes, we throw a few loving crumbs. We may even join the voices shouting, eat some of the crumbs ourselves, start a program or project through our church buildings, or hang a flag. But as Alex Ruxberg and Scott Warren wrote in their Introducing the Missional Church, what is, why it matters, and how to become one, it's not about programs and projects. It's about how a church embodies God's story today, embodies God's church's mission for the world. It's about going into foreign territory, being a part of uncomfortable conversations and places and spaces, listening and connecting and engaging and building relationships to help us let go of any of our hidden prejudices, open our limited human views, to keep growing spiritually and closer to God, and become more aware and expand our understanding of God's kingdom of heaven that's in our midst. Friend, God is breaking through all the time, especially today, bringing forth the voices from the margins to help us move us and invite us to witness and proclaim and act, widening the circle so we can provide loving spaces to reach over and across and under the tables for hands that need connection, that are worthy of God's love. Let's continue as a church to make sure we're answering God's call, to widen God's circle, sacred circle, to help break barriers of oppression, to be allies to the lost and the suffering and the lonely, to embody the good news with our whole beings, with our actions, our words, and our presence. Let us continue to be courageously faithful to our Lord and follow Jesus' lead. For God's church's mission for the world is greater than our imagination, greater than our own. May all of creation be transformed by God's mission, and may we take an active role in loving all of God's creation. Amen.